Imagine you're lying in bed, the room dim, perhaps just the soft glow of a phone screen or a single lamp. The world outside has gone quiet. Pull the covers up a little higher. Let the day slip away. Tonight, we're not rushing anywhere. We're simply drifting back through time to an era of crowns, castles, and very human calculations. The kind of calculations that look brilliant in the moment and absurd when the dust settles. If you're new here, or if you've been listening for a while, welcome. Hit that like button if you're already half asleep. Subscribe so the algorithm knows you enjoy falling asleep to slightly sarcastic history, and maybe drop a comment telling me where in the world you're listening from tonight and what time it is. Nagpur at 1 in the afternoon, or somewhere it's properly dark. Either way, settle in. We're talking about medieval queens tonight. Not the fairy tale ones. The real ones. The ones history labeled evil because they played the game better than the men around them expected. Or perhaps because they played it at all. Let's begin with a simple observation. Power in the medieval world was supposed to flow in neat lines. King to son, husband to wife in a decorative sense only. Queens were meant to smile, produce heirs, and look pious in stained glass. But every so often, one would notice the line was more like a suggestion. And once they noticed, well, things got interesting. Take Eleanor of Aquitaine. She didn't start as a rebel. She started as perhaps the most eligible heiress in Europe. Duchess in her own right of a vast, wealthy region. Married first to the King of France, Louis VII. Pious man, a crusader, a man who, legend says, once complained that marriage to Eleanor felt like being hitched to a volcano. They went on crusade together. It didn't go well. Annulment followed. She was free again, richer than before. Then she married Henry II of England, a man with energy to match hers. Together they built an empire that stretched from Scotland to the Pyrenees. For a while it worked, but Henry, being Henry, began treating her lands like his personal piggy bank and her sons like chess pieces. Eleanor, never one to be quietly bankrupted or sidelined, decided the arrangement no longer suited her. This is where it gets strange. She didn't simply complain at dinner. She encouraged, some say orchestrated, a full-scale rebellion. 3 of her sons, plus her ex-husband the French king, rose against Henry. Castles burned. Armies marched. Henry won in the end, of course. He always won battles. But the cost was locking his wife away for 16 years. 16. Not in a dungeon exactly. In comfortable castles. Still, 16 years is a long time to reflect on how a temporary disagreement can become a permanent imprisonment. Eleanor outlived him. She outlived almost everyone. Released in her old age, she went on to manage kingdoms, arrange marriages, even outmaneuver her own son Richard the Lionheart when necessary. The rebellion that was meant to be a short, sharp shock became the defining scandal of Henry's reign. And the queen who was supposed to be decorative became the one who almost unraveled an empire. Funny how support for your children's inheritance can look like treason when the king disagrees. Smoothly now, let's drift across the channel and a few generations later to another queen who understood that sometimes the only way to keep power is to take it outright. Isabella of France arrived in England at 12 years old, a political bride for Edward II. She was French, elegant, educated. He was, well, more interested in his favorites than in governing. Or in her. Piers Gaveston first, then Hugh Despencer. Isabella endured. She bore children. She waited. But patience has limits even for queens. When Edward's rule became unbearable, taxes, favorites, military disasters, she left for France, officially to negotiate peace, unofficially to gather support. She met Roger Mortimer there, another exile. They became allies, then lovers, then invaders. In 1326, they landed in England with a small force. The country, tired of Edward and his circle, didn't resist. They melted away. Edward was captured, deposed, imprisoned. Now the official story gets murky. Edward died in Berkeley Castle. A red-hot poker was involved in some accounts. Others say natural causes. Isabella and Mortimer ruled as regents for her young son, Edward III. For a while it worked. But Mortimer grew arrogant, started acting like the king. Isabella, perhaps realizing she'd traded one overbearing man for another, didn't stop him fast enough. Her son, now 18, staged his own coup. Mortimer executed. Isabella retired quietly to a comfortable life. No red-hot anything for her. Just a long, graceful fade into obscurity. The woman who had toppled a king spent her last years in luxury, probably amused at how neatly the wheel turned. The scheme that began as a temporary alliance to fix a bad marriage became the only successful deposition of an English king by his wife. And then, of course, the men wrote the chronicles. She became the she-wolf. Because nothing says evil quite like refusing to be quietly miserable. Across the centuries, the pattern repeats with small variations. A queen sees an opportunity, acts on it. The act, meant to solve today's crisis, hardens into tomorrow's legend. No one plans to become the villain in the story. They plan to survive. Survival just looks different when you're wearing a crown. Consider Margaret of Anjou, wife of Henry VI, a Lancastrian queen during the Wars of the Roses. Henry was gentle, pious, and, inconveniently, mentally absent for long stretches. The kingdom fractured. Nobles chose sides. Margaret, foreign-born, ambitious for her son, refused to let the crown slip away. She raised armies, negotiated alliances, led troops herself when necessary. After the Battle of Wakefield, she had the Duke of York killed, his head crowned with paper in mockery. Brutal? Yes. Effective? For a time. But the Yorkists called her a she-wolf too. Same nickname, different decade. She fought until her son died at Tewkesbury. Then she was captured, ransomed back to France, lived out her days poor but unbroken. The habit of defending her son's right became so ingrained that peace was never an option. What started as maternal instinct ended as unrelenting war. And when the war finally ended, the winning side wrote her as the furious foreign queen who refused to yield, as though yielding would have saved anything. Further back, the stories grow darker, the labels harsher. Brunhilda of Austrasia in the 6th century, among the Franks. A Visigothic princess married into Merovingian chaos. Her sister murdered, her husband's killer on the throne. Brunhilda waged a vendetta that lasted decades. Poison, exile, war. She ruled through her sons and grandsons. When she finally lost, her enemies, her own great-grandsons, tied her to a wild horse and dragged her to death. One chronicler says she was 80. Another says 3 days of torture first. Horrible, undeniably, but step back. In a world where kings murdered brothers as routine politics, her ruthlessness was simply the female edition. The vengeance that began as justice for her sister became a generational blood feud. No one paused to say, perhaps we stop here. The habit outlived the reason. And then there's Urraca of Leon and Castile, first woman to rule those kingdoms in her own name. Her father Alfonso VI named her heir, then married her to a man who tried to sideline her. She fought him off. Literally. Armies clashed. She won. Later her son tried to control her. She resisted. The power she claimed temporarily, to hold the throne until her son matured, became permanent because no one could quite take it from her. She ruled a fractured realm. Bishops against nobles. Cities against lords. She navigated it all. Not sweetly, not quietly. When she died, her son Alfonso VII inherited a stronger kingdom. But the chronicles still grumbled about a woman who wouldn't step aside. The temporary regency became a reign. The reign became a scandal. Because queens, apparently, are meant to hand over power gracefully. When they don't, history takes notes. We could go on. Fredegund, perhaps, who poisoned rivals and bathed in their blood according to one monkish tale. Or others whose names survive only in the margins of chronicles, marked as ambitious, cruel, unnatural. But the thread is the same. A decision made in crisis. A line crossed once, then twice. Then it becomes who they are. The crown demands ruthlessness, so they supply it. And when the dust settles, the men who survived write the story. The queens who didn't, well, they become cautionary tales. Look around our own world. We still do it. A temporary policy becomes permanent bureaucracy. A short-term alliance becomes a toxic friendship. A necessary compromise hardens into dogma. We tell ourselves it's just for now, until it's forever. Perhaps that's the real scheme, not poison or rebellion. But the quiet way power convinces us that what was meant to be temporary was always the plan. So here we are, another story told. Another set of queens filed under evil because they refused the script. As you drift toward sleep, think about the next time you decide something is only for now. The habit forms faster than you expect. Thanks for listening. If you're still awake, sweet dreams. If you're already gone, good. That's the idea. Sleep well.